I'm Zoe, and today we're doing 2 new t-shirt cutting designs, so welcome to my channel. For these tutorials, you will need a t-shirt, a ruler, a pair of sharp scissors, something to mark your clothing with, and a few sewing pins help but aren't completely necessary. Alright, first up is the Fringe Crop-Top. This shirt was cut in a previous video, which I will link in the top corner and also down in the description if you're wondering about the neckline. So put your shirt on inside out and mark your waist on both sides and also your belly button. This will be where the fringe starts, so feel free to make the marks slightly higher or slightly lower, but keep in mind that it will be shorter when you raise your arms. Now, lay your shirt down flat, face up and still inside out, and use your ruler to make sure your waist marks are the same distance from the bottom of the shirt. Then connect the 2 waist marks with a line. I curved mine slightly down towards the belly button mark. Now, this part is optional, but I decided to undo the hem at the bottom of the shirt because there's a few extra centimeters of fabric hiding in there. So just carefully cut the threads and pull open the hem, or you could just cut it off. We're going to start marking out the fringe, so grab your ruler and start making marks 2 centimeters apart along the bottom of the shirt. This will determine the thickness of the fringe, so this is just average t-shirt cotton fabric, but if you're working with a very thin fabric, you might want to make the marks a little wider apart, or if you have a thicker fabric, maybe make them a little closer together, but it's really a preference thing. I find 2 centimeters wide is usually perfect. Now start drawing straight lines from your waistline down to the bottom of your shirt, using your markings as a guide. Now don't worry if they're not perfect, we just want them to be generally the same size. It's fine if a few are a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. After drafting out the fringe, make sure the front and the back of the shirt are perfectly lined up and that they lay flat. If you're using pins, pin the 2 layers of fabric together in a few places so that they stay put while you're cutting. I started cutting along the fringe lines, stopping at the waistline. Now when you cut the first strip at the side of your t-shirt, you will also have to cut the seam to make it into 2 strips. This shirt doesn't have any side seams, so I'm just cutting it down the middle. Be sure to do this on the last strip as well on the other side of the shirt. Cut along each line we drew and be sure to remove the pins. After all the strips are cut, carefully start stretching them. I find doing it one at a time works best, but be careful not to pull too hard or you might just pull one right off. So the bottom fringe is done, now it's time to do the sleeves, and it's basically the same. I carefully cut the threads and opened up the hem, but then I also undid the seam from the armpit to the hem as well, but you can just cut it if you want. Measure and make marks 2 centimeters apart along the bottom of the sleeve. Then I was going to use my ruler, but I decided to just wing it, drawing straight lines from the shoulder seam to the end of the sleeve, using your markings as a spacing guide. And you guessed it, we're gonna add some pins and cut along these lines. The first strip at the top of the sleeve will have to be cut in half, just like the sides of the shirt, and remove the pins when you're done. Okay, after the fringe is cut, it's time to start stretching the fabric. And do you remember earlier when I said be careful not to pull too hard? Well, I pulled too hard. That's okay, because now I can show you what to do if it happens to you. If you are just doing the fringe tutorial, you don't have to do anything. Just leave it, nobody will notice. But if you want to use this shirt to do the next tutorial, you will have to remove another strip of fabric because we need to have an even number. You could just cut a different strip in half, but then they might be too thin. Alright, repeat on the other sleeve, but be careful not to rip any pieces off. Then turn your shirt back inside in and you're done. This shirt is really fun to move around and dance in. Alright, next up is the macrame style crop top. So to start, you will need a fringe cut shirt from the first tutorial. And before we get into it, I want to talk about some knots. The first knot we are doing is the square knot. It is the same knot we use to tie a bow on our shoes, but it's easy to do wrong. So a quick rundown. You got your two pieces. Grab one of them, in this case it's the left. Place it over top of the other, fold it underneath, up through, and then pull both pieces evenly to tighten. Now grab the opposite piece, in this case the right, and place it over the other, fold it underneath and up through, pulling both ends evenly to tighten. Oh look, my cat came to interfere. No surprise here, I used to bug him until he left, but I recently started ignoring him and it seems to work faster. See? Bye! So if you forget which side you started on and you end up using the same side twice, it will look like this. It's still a knot, but it's not the one we're looking for. So just untie it and redo it. Right over left, then left over right, or vice versa. Now the other knot we're using is just a regular overhand knot. So make a loop, then pull the ends through the loop and pull to tighten. Alright, back to the tutorial. So lay your shirt down flat, then grab a small section of fringe to start with. Spread it out and grab any two pieces and tie them in a square knot a couple of centimeters down from the base of the fringe. Gently tighten and adjust the knot by pulling on the inside pieces to make sure it's centered. Grab the next two pieces and repeat the process. Continue this all the way around the shirt, trying to keep the knots level with each other so they all line up. Okay, after you're done the first row of knots, it should look like this. So grab a small section of fringe again and spread it out flat. The pieces coming out from your knots should stick out and touch a piece from the knot beside it. That is where you should start your next row of square knots. So each knot in this row should be about 2 centimeters below and centered between the two knots above it. Repeat on the next two sections and then continue all the way around the shirt so you have 2 rows of knots. Okay, starting to look like something now. So once again, grab a small section of fringe and spread it out flat, and start making a new row of knots the same way. These knots should line up with the knots in the very first row, creating a diamond shape. But before I continued with this row, I quickly checked to make sure that I would have enough length left for the last row of knots. You will need about 10 centimeters of fabric to finish this section, but if you have more, you can add more rows of square knots. So if you have the length to do this row, continue it all the way around the shirt. Okay, now to finish the bottom with overhand knots. Grab a small section of fringe again and spread it out flat. Just like before, you should put your knots about 2 centimeters below and centered between the two knots above it. So grab your pieces together, stretch them, make a loop, then pull the ends through the loop. Make sure that the knot is in the right place before you pull to tighten. Then repeat on the next 2 sections and continue it all the way around the shirt so it looks like little tassels. Okay, at this point you might be wondering if it might have been faster to just learn how to macrame and make yourself a new shirt, and my answer to that would be yeah, maybe. But now it's time for the sleeves. So I'm going to do the one that I badly mutilated first so that I can show you how to deal with it. So just like before, we're going to grab a small section of fringe to start with, and then start our first row of square knots about 2 centimeters down from the base of the fringe. Continue all the way around. And if you have a gap like me where you're missing pieces, we're just going to tie a square knot like usual, but use more of the fringe. So be careful not to pull these pieces closer together. They need to stay that same distance apart or your sleeve will be too tight. This will blend right in, but you're not going to be able to make as many rows of knots. Continue to add rows of square knots all the way around the sleeve until you start to run out of fabric. When the ends become too short to tie any more knots, just make sure the knots are super tight and then trim off the ends. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other sleeve, although it'll be much easier because I didn't rip off any pieces. All right, that's it. I love this shirt. I think it would make a great beach cover up, but I also love it with some high-waisted jeans. But that is all I got for this video, so thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed yourself, be sure to let me know, and if you're looking for more, check out my Instagram, @anorthodox. Subscribe to this channel by clicking here, and watch another video by clicking over here.